Welcome, guys, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to my new podcast. My name is Ben, and today I have a very special and unique guest with me. And I'm just going to do an introduction, and I want to do a proper introduction. That's why I'm going to use my little friend to not miss any important information. So today with me is Alex McRobert, also known as Sober Yoga Girl on social media. And she's helping women around the world transform their lives. She runs yoga retreats, yoga teacher trainings. She coaches individuals, teach yoga classes, and much more. She has also built a big online community. It's called the Mindful Life Practice and the Sober Girls Yoga Facebook group. And in 2023, she opened up the Mindful Life Practice Bali Retreat Center. Welcome, Alex.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I hope I didn't miss anything.
I'm impressed. I was like, you've done your research.
Yeah, I actually also read some articles.
Wow.
And I found them very interesting. So I think some of my questions will pop up out of that as well.
Yeah.
But actually, I know that you just came from your own retreat called Letting Go, if I'm not mistaken. That was happening here in UAE. Can you tell us a bit more about this?
It was, yeah. So I lived in the UAE for a long time. I was here for 5 years. And when I built my community, the Mindful Life Practice, I was still living in the UAE. So I have a lot of old clients here and old friends. And I like to come back and host a retreat every once in a while at this. It was the first hotel where I ever hosted my first retreat a few years ago. And it was just incredible. There were 16 women, and not only women that were UAE residents, but we had someone fly from Bahrain, someone from Kuwait, and someone even flew from Greece, which is wild. Okay. And it just was this powerful coming together of women. Many are sober, some are sober curious, and it was a weekend of yoga and healing and transformation. And I just feel very, very privileged and honored to get to do the work I do.
That's awesome. So being sober is not a prerequisite to attending the retreat, but it's a main topic of it as well, or how does it work?
So it depends on what the retreat is. And where I'm doing it. And I have to say that in the UAE, I find that if I call something a sober retreat, just because of the stigma of sober, there's people that are not going to come. And there's people that will feel like that's not for me, or I don't want my colleagues to think I'm at a sober retreat or whatever. And so it's like a retreat for people that want something other than the brunches. And that way you don't have to be sober. You can be sober curious. You could literally just want to do yoga for the weekend. And that makes it really open and really accessible. And the really cool thing is that then you get people coming to it that never even have thought about sobriety. And then they just get surrounded by different women who have walked that path. And then obviously the sober journeys come up, and you can take from it even if you don't think you have a problematic relationship with alcohol. But I also do retreats, like I'll do specific, like next year I have the Sober Girls Yoga Adventure to India. And that is like, you should be sober or sober curious if you want to come on that one, So it depends on what the offering is. But a lot of what I do is for sober women. Yeah.
Okay. But I do agree with you, actually. I feel like the stigma in UAE, it's quite big on this.
Totally.
So also when I don't know, yesterday I was in a restaurant, Asia, and I tell them, the waiter, that I don't drink alcohol, and people are always kind of like mocking me, and I'm like, what is wrong with you,
Totally.
I feel like in Europe there are more places with also like the alcohol-free options,
totally,
versus here, but I guess it will come here eventually.
Totally. And it's already made a bit of progress since I first got sober. So when I first quit drinking in 2019, there was nothing at all. And then I think it was like December of 2020. So I had been sober for like a year and a half. And that was when they got Heineken Zero and the drink dry store. And yeah, it was amazing. And so there definitely is progress being made. Absolutely. And I feel that it's even progressed in the time since, I did my first retreat here. I did a retreat called the Sober Soul Weekend. That was my first retreat. And someone gave me that feedback of like, I didn't want anyone to know I was coming. And that was why I was like, okay, I understand. Yeah.
Okay. So take us back to your, let's say, childhood and teenage years. Can you tell us a bit about your life story and then how alcohol actually played part of it?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was raised in Toronto in Canada. And I would say that the amount of drinking that I was exposed to growing up was not too different than like the normal Canadian family. My parents would drink on the weekend. My dad would drink often. And as, part of my family social occasions, alcohol was like a huge kind of centerpiece of all of them. Yeah. But I don't think that that's that different than a lot of people's childhood experiences in like the Western world. And when I became a teenager, I think I just thought it was like cool to drink. It was, what adults did, all my friends, my family. And I started drinking. I drank for the first time when I was 14. And that was like a traumatic experience.
Why?
So I stole alcohol from my parents. Me and all my friends stole alcohol from our parents. And we went and drank at a park party. And one of my friends, I was okay. I was lucky that there weren't a lot of times where I got so drunk that I couldn't like safely get myself home. But I drank to excess and so did my friends. And that night, one of my friends, like we found her unconscious basically. And and we found her unconscious with this older boy. And I carried her out of the park. To my memory, I carried her out of the park until a police officer came and called my parents. My parents were like so mad at me. And I look back on the whole thing in many years hindsight, and I'm like, I actually think I did a really good thing by like, taking care of my friend and getting her to safety. And the interesting thing about that memory is like, to my memory, I was alone with her. And then many years later, I had coffee with another friend from high school. And to her memory, she was alone with her. And neither of us remember the other person being there. And we actually carried her together.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which is so crazy. And I told this story to my sister, who's a social worker. And my sister said, maybe it was so scary and isolating for both of you that like, that's what your memory remembers is like that it was isolating. And I was like, wow. But yeah, that was my first drinking experience. And then maybe like 6 months later, I started dating this like, guy who was in grade 12 and I was in grade 10 and he was older. And so he was drinking. And then that's what really got me into it. So I didn't drink for a long time. And then I started dating him and it was like drinking, every weekend with him. And from there, it just it was like the thing to do. Then we broke up and I drank more. And and so it was just a big part of my teenage years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how did this develop into your, student years? And then when you started working, would you say that your drinking progressed?
Yeah. Yeah. So when I went to university, I remember like, in the first week or so of school, it was like our frosh week. And I remember missing a lot of the events because like I was so hungover. And I would go out like every night of the week. There was like a different thing, it was like Tumbleweed Tuesday or like Throwback Thursday or like there was always a reason to just like get drunk.
Exactly.
And at that age, it was kind of normal. Like it was what everyone was doing. So I didn't feel like there was anything that kind of wrong with me or different. And when it really started to control my life was when I moved to Kuwait. And the funny thing about me accepting that job in Kuwait is that everyone who knew, like I don't say everyone who knew anything, but people who knew where Kuwait was, the first thing they would say was they were like, Alex, you know that's a dry country, right? And then I would be like, yeah, it's fine. Like, the people who hired me told me that I could get alcohol. They were like, you can make it, you can like learn how to get it. And so I was like, yeah, I can get it. And I remember this guy that I went to high school with just looking, he's like, you're going to get arrested.
How old were you at that time?
I was like 23. I was 23. And he said to me, he's like, every time I ever see you, you have like a giant bottle of liquor in your hand and you're like making out with some guy, like you're going to get arrested. And I was like, I'm going to be fine. But when you end up in a situation where you're in like a dry country, like for me, it just became this obsession. Like I got the recipe for wine. I learned how to make it. My wine was like horrible. Am I allowed to talk about this, by the way?
I guess so, yeah. So you can make your own wine, like
you can, yeah.
Okay.
But I was horrible at it.
But it was still like there was alcohol and you can drink it. You could get drunk with it, even though the taste was probably shit.
Yeah. And really sick. I was sick all the time.
Oh, okay.
So I refer to myself as kind of like the artist, like of the artist winemaker. And so of course I then meet my like wine dealer who is kind of like the scientist. Like he can actually like, properly, hygienically seal his bottles and stuff. And like his wine actually tasted the same. And so then I have like the stuff I'm making and then I have the stuff I'm getting from him. And then I'm just like, you can drink on embassy properties. So I'll date anyone who can like get me into an embassy. So I'm just hanging out with like the weirdest people, like people that I would not normally form a relationship with.
Yeah.
And then, I get to my second year in Kuwait and I meet someone who, for his work and his setup, he is able to fly out to Dubai and Abu Dhabi and Qatar. And then all of a sudden we're flying, like, I think we went every other weekend and we would just land and we'd be like, well, since we can't drink in Kuwait, let's like start drinking at 8. But like we were drinking in Kuwait, like we were drinking our like homemade stuff. And then we get over here and just have these blowout weekends. And so then I moved to Abu Dhabi because I was like, well, I can drink there. Yeah. And I remember saying to people, I'm like, I know I sound like an alcoholic, but I'm not. You can just drink in Abu Dhabi. And many years in hindsight, I'm like, that was all so problematic, but I didn't see it at the time. And I got over here and I lasted a year and a half until I was like, I have to get sober. And it was just, my life was kind of falling apart a little bit. Like I was in credit card debt. I was like super depressed. But I had a good life. I had a good job. I had a good apartment. And I was aware like this is the thing.
Yeah, I assume that the outside people looking at you at that time could probably say, oh, you're living a perfect life, right?
Totally.
Like
totally.
You don't have a problem. Everything is great. But I guess no one truly knows what's happening inside of us besides us.
Totally.
Ourselves. And yeah, I also feel the same about my story when I look back to my past. Now I realized, there were so many signs, but I was just blind to them. It's very interesting. By the way, I read in one of the articles that the catalyst for you to stop drinking was the 28-day alcohol-free challenge, right?
Yeah.
Can you tell us a bit more about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So around the time that this was all going down, like I had been in the UAE for probably a year, going to brunches all the time, ladies' nights, I start Googling how to quit drinking. Okay. And then the algorithm starts
working. Yeah.
Starts working. And I always think back to that, and people think that social media and the algorithm is like such a bad thing. And for me, it was like, it is the reason that I'm sober today, 100%.
Okay.
So I was seeing on my Facebook all of these ads for this sober community. Yeah. And there were many stories, but there was one guy that really I connected with, and I don't think they put his name on it. So I don't really know who he is, but I remember this all the time because I was reading his story. He was like my age and he was living in the UK, and he basically said, I was going out for happy hour all the time, every day with my friends after work. And it just hit a point where I didn't want to do it anymore. And I'm so much happier and healthier. And here's how my fitness has improved. Here's how my mental health has improved. And this really resonated with me because it wasn't this thing of like, I'm an alcoholic, there's something wrong with me, I'm flawed, I had to get sober. It was just a guy who seemed like me, you know? Yeah. And I definitely identified years on that I had a drinking problem, but at the time I don't think I saw it. And to see this kind of soft approach, which was like, your life can just be better if you quit, really connected with me. But I was like, I can't do this because of this X, Y, and Z. You know, I have this vacation, I have this event, I have this thing.
Yeah, of course.
So, yeah. So there was a good few month period of when I just was like, I can't do it. And then I had my last vacation for like 3 months or something. So I was like, okay, this would be a good time to do 28 days sober. So I signed up for the challenge. And in the first week, I actually don't think I signed up right away. I think I tried to do it on my own. And in the first week, I was okay for like the first couple days. And I remember having like a really big panic attack at work over like something in hindsight that just seems very trivial. And also in hindsight actually worked out in my favor, which is that as I said, I was massively in credit card debt because I was like partying and traveling, whatever. So I was trying to move out of the school accommodation to like save money. And my application got rejected because I was like too late or something. Anyway, many years later in hindsight, it all worked out because then we had a global pandemic and then I was stuck in a beautiful apartment. Right. And so in hindsight, I'm like, actually, that was like a pretty good thing. Yeah. But at the time I was like so upset because I was like, how am I going to like get myself out of this like credit card debt? Which like the answer was like becoming sober. And like stop spending so much money. But I just remember being so distressed and upset that like I couldn't stop crying. And I remember my boss pulling me into her office and I couldn't even tell her like I was like 5 days sober. And in hindsight, it's definitely the chemistry of my brain was just all over the place in a withdrawal, in a withdrawal from alcohol. And I remember that I was very lucky that whole thing happened because there happened to be this woman on campus who was like studying to become a counselor, and they were able to give me like free therapy through my work, which was amazing. And that woman actually was also sober, and that was really cool because I got to meet her one-on-one at work for free and really like played a role in me through my sober journey. But the first 10 days, I was like having breakdowns all the time. And then, you know, I think I got to like day 14 and I was like, wait, this is like really great to be like not hungover on a Saturday. And somewhere between like 20, I think I was around, because I remember being 21 days sober and going on a date with this guy who was like trying to make me drink the whole time. And I posted something about it in the sober group saying that, and something I said was like, I don't want to tell him that I like want to be sober forever because I don't think he's going to want to date me. So I know already by that point, by like 21 days, I was like,
this is it.
Yeah. There was just a shift. And the withdrawal for me was so bad that oftentimes I'm like, it's enough to keep me sober because I just don't want to do that again. And I think to all these people who keep stopping and starting their sobriety, I'm like, you're just doing the hardest 10 days like over and over again. And once you get far enough into your streak and you see, wow, this is actually good. It's enough. It was enough for me to keep me from going back.
Okay. So then the 28 days turn into forever now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think I upgraded to like the 90-day program and then the 1-year program. And I knew very early on, I mean, I also met this psychic who told me that I was going to like start this yoga business. And once you have a purpose behind your sobriety, it's just like, you know, smooth sailing.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah. It's funny what you mentioned before, like looking back about the apartment, that it was actually the best thing that happened, right? And a lot of the times when you're in a shitty situation, you can't connect the dots. But then looking backward, you can see clearly that, oh, wow, this is the best thing that happened to me. So actually, when I look back on my life, I think alcohol addiction was actually the best thing that happened to me in my life.
Yeah.
But in the midst of it, it was the worst thing.
Yeah.
Or at least that's what I thought. Or I don't know, losing my job at one time, I thought at that time was the worst thing ever.
Yes.
But then because of that, I was able to find a better job.
Yeah.
So it is quite funny. But I'm just wondering, so the initial stages of quitting alcohol, you mentioned at the beginning you had the withdrawal symptoms.
Yeah.
Did that turn into some kind of a, let's say, natural high? Because that was my experience where, let's say, for the first couple of months, I just felt like a superhuman.
The pink clouds.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
You had the same experience?
Yeah.
Okay. But then I feel like now when people ask me, so how does it feel to be alcohol free for, I don't know, 2.5 years? Now I'm like, hey, it's normal. This is just like normal life now, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
Totally.
But a more peaceful life, more calm life, I would say, compared to before.
Yeah.
So before, when you mentioned that you were still drinking and you started Googling about how to quit drinking, was there a specific moment that happened before that that made you start searching for that? Or was it just a series of events and a series of, I don't know, negative emotions that led you to that moment?
Like, I don't think there was a specific event, but there were like things that happened that I think sometimes I almost like forget over time, but I'm just like, that was crazy. Like I'm trying to remember how this came up recently, but once I was like drunk, I was like drunk in my house and like flipped my hair over and like actually lit it on fire once.
No.
Yeah. And I was like in the bath after a like night out and I lit my hair on fire and then I like dunked my head under. And I had totally forgot about it until I went to my hairdresser. And my hairdresser said to me, she was like, "Who cut your hair last time?" And I said, "You." And she was like, "Was I drunk?" It was like, no, I was drunk and I lit it on fire. But it was just things would happen to me like that, you know, that, or like something I didn't talk about for a long time because I was still a school teacher and I didn't want it to impact my reputation. I was really mindful about what I said, but I did share this on a podcast about a year ago, is that one day I got so drunk. It was like a Tuesday night. It was like a ladies' night. And I actually ran into my boss that day in a bar and he ordered me a drink, like before I got so drunk. But I got so drunk that I couldn't even tell the taxi driver how to get to my apartment. My friends did that I was with. But then I was trying to make substitute teacher plans so that I didn't have to go into work the next day, but I was so drunk that I couldn't do it. And I remember that night so well because I took the taxi all the way back to Ream Island and I think I only had like 500 dirhams in my wallet, which wasn't how much the taxi cost.
Okay.
But the taxi driver was saying he didn't have change, which in hindsight, I'm like, I bet this guy just knew that I was so drunk that he thought I would just give it to him, but I did not. I was like, go around the corner, go to Pizza Express. But then I remember in the morning, thank God my car was broken down. There's something wrong with my car, so someone drove me into work because I look back and I'm like, I should not have been behind the wheel that morning.
Yeah.
And when I got into work, people knew that I had been to a ladies' night just from my face. Like my eyes were so puffy and everyone thought it was so funny. And I got into work, everyone was like, knew something was wrong with me. And then the kids were out at recess and I lay down on the carpet and was just like sleeping. And I remember a kid coming into the classroom and he was like, "Miss Alex, what is wrong with you?" And that was one of the last big nights in Abu Dhabi. Then I went with my mom to Morocco. Of course, I was like, I can't get sober now, you know, because I'm going on this trip. So me and my mom were in Morocco and I drank every single day in Morocco. And the flight from Morocco to Abu Dhabi was my day one sober. So.
So you had your last drink in Morocco, actually.
I did on a rooftop hotel I think I was in Casablanca.
But at the time of having your last sip, were you thinking that that might be your last? No,
absolutely not.
Okay.
I think I knew that I was going to do a sobriety challenge. I don't think I knew that I would be so solid about it, because for years I had been saying like, I want to quit drinking. I want to quit drinking.
Yeah.
So I don't think I knew how solid I would be, but I'm this type of person who all like wiffle waffle. But then when I actually say that I'm doing something, it's like, that's it, you know? So I would never say I'm quitting drinking unless I was actually doing it, you know? Like I would never be like, it's for sure happening until I knew that I was for sure doing it. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I felt like, I was so bad at keeping promises to myself when I was still drinking, because I also had a lot of these periods. Yeah. I never said that I'm not gonna ever drink again.
Yeah.
By the time I actually did, and that was 2.5 years ago. But a lot of the times I would say, oh, I'm not drinking for 1 week. Oh, I'm not drinking tonight. And then 2 hours later I was drinking. So my reputation was that I'm not a reliable source, which is horrible,
Yeah.
But I hope this is now changing a bit, right? By the way, if you can look back into the past, and I know sometimes it's a bit hard to analyze this, but what were some of the old beliefs you had about alcohol that you had to get rid of during your journey of getting sober?
One that came up for me, that came up earlier, was I was talking about that guy that I went out with who was trying to make me drink.
Yeah.
I thought when I was getting sober that no one would want to be with a sober person. I thought there were like no sober people in the world. I thought that I would never date again. Like no one is ever going to love me again because I'm sober, which is just so crazy to me in hindsight, because now as a sober person, I find it like the most attractive quality in someone that I'm going out with. Like I'm actually turned off by if I go out with someone who likes to drink. I'm like not that interested, because I mean, it depends. If you're going to be like maybe have a healthy relationship with alcohol and have like a drink or so, maybe. But if you're someone who wants to like go blow out partying all night, I'm not that interested. And that was such an interesting thing to me, was that I didn't understand that we live in these, on social media, it's called an echo chamber of like, you have your echo chamber of people who believe in the same stuff as you. And it's the same in like real life. You gather people around you who are similar. So all my friends in Abu Dhabi drank the same amount that I did. And I specifically chose them so that they would normalize what I was doing.
Exactly,
right? And so as soon as my world is so sober now, because I bring in these sober people. I have these sober retreats. I have all these sober Facebook groups. So like all my friends are sober. So now I am like in the opposite side, where I think that like the world is becoming more sober. And I'm like, maybe it's just because my world is that way,
Yeah.
And so I think sometimes when we're like, I think it's really common for a lot of people going alcohol free. They don't know anyone that's sober in their world. And that means that they have to start reaching out beyond their community. Like there was one woman on my retreat this weekend who, it was the craziest thing. I had posted in a sober Facebook group something about something totally different than Dubai. And she commented being like, where are your retreats? I sent her a link, and she lives in Dubai and she's on my retreat a week later. And she told me, I don't know anyone that's sober at all. And she's trying to get sober. And that's the perfect example of like, that's what you do. You find a sober retreat, you get on that retreat, and that's how you make a bunch of sober friends, So it's just like breaking out of that world.
Yeah. I had a very similar experience, I would say.
Yeah.
Before that, everyone in my life was drinking. And now, like, a lot of my friends are still drinking.
Yeah.
But especially when it comes to dating, I would say, I feel like I'm just like naturally attracting women who do not drink. And I also feel like I would not be able to tolerate a partner who's still drinking heavily.
Yeah.
Maybe like a drink or two, it's okay because it's not really changing your consciousness.
Yeah.
But like getting drunk, I just can't relate to this anymore, right?
Yeah.
Even though I was doing it for so many years, but it's just like a different old version of me.
Yeah. And this, it's so funny because there's this guy that I went out with when I was 21 days sober, who I was like, oh my God, he's like not going to want to be with me because I'm sober. And I actually think he's blocked me on Instagram because I posted about that date because it's like a great story. But before he blocked me, I was still following him. And he posted something on his story. He had a new girlfriend, and he posted on his story that they were getting home from partying at 6 a.m. And I was watching this video of them walking up the stairs being like, that is my nightmare. That is my nightmare. Like, thank God that guy, he ghosted me. And I'm like, thank God, because like, I don't want to spend the rest of my life, even me being sober, I don't want to be like getting home at 6 a.m. And it's really amazing. But that took me a long time to realize, I think, like maybe a year into sobriety to realize that, it actually, I'm like, I thought that it was like a bad thing that I was sober, and I was like, this is actually like a really good thing.
So if you go on a date with someone right now, and he asks you why you don't drink anymore, what's your typical answer?
Well, the thing about me now is that you can find out like everything about me on social media. And like, if you really wanted to, you could like listen to these podcasts. And so I kind of like when I end up with someone who has not like found me on social media and read all that stuff, because I can actually like tell a bit of my story. But I am really upfront of like, I had pretty big mental health struggles, and being sober has been like the best thing for it. My work is now in sobriety. I actually even have it on a dating app. I saw a girl put this on her Instagram, and I was like, that's actually great. On Hinge, it just says like, something you should know about me is that I don't drink. I don't drink, but I don't mind if my partner does. But if you're a heavy drinker, it's probably not a good match. And so that way, it's like they see it right away. And and then if they're like, oh, I want someone who's going to party with me, then they just don't even match with me, And so that really helps. But I think because being sober is such a big part of my personality, I don't really face it anymore the way I used to,
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, I feel like at least at the beginning, it's quite hard to explain to a person, because maybe I don't know if you had that experience yourself as well, but maybe at the beginning you're not also as confident in your new identity. Totally. And you're like, oh, maybe, I don't know, in 1 month I will still start drinking again. But then now, after a while, I would assume it's a bit easier. So you've been alcohol-free since, you told me, 2019, right?
Yeah, just over 4 years.
Yeah, that's amazing. That's amazing. So how do you deal with social events these days if you go out and you're not drinking and let's say someone else is still drinking? Are you able to still attend these events, or you just naturally gravitate towards the events that are like fully, let's say, alcohol-free, sober events? Yeah,
that's a good question. So I live majority of the time in Bali, and I'm in Ubud, Bali, which is kind of like the yoga sort of capital. And so it's pretty normal to be sober there. So that's really cool. Like there is alcohol and people drink, but usually it's like tourists, and you can tell that they're just there on vacation. Like the general crowd that is consistent there is pretty spiritual, and as a result, there's not a lot of drinking. And so that's really incredible. And it's really good for me to get out of that place to remember like what the rest of the world is like. And sometimes like I'm okay a lot of the times, but I'll need to like I'm thinking back to like my sister's wedding, for example. Like it really helps me to like exercise or work out the day of an event, to have alcohol-free drinks, like have alcohol-free beer around. And also sometimes it helps me to like go late to an event, because I really pick up on other people's energy. And I find that a lot of people have like a bit of an anxious energy at events until they have their first drink in their hand. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I will like get the anxiety from them.
Okay.
But if I go to an event like half an hour late or something, everyone has already had their first drink and they're all fine. And then I'm fine.
Okay.
So those are like the things that really help me. But I don't find myself really at that many drinking events anymore, you know? And I organize a lot of sober events for people. Maybe that's it too, is that I do so much sober socializing, like the retreat that I just had, for example, that when I'm done work, often I'll just kind of want to chill and go inward and not like go to the next thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you created kind of your own bubble of sober people.
Totally. Yeah.
Now I completely understand what you said before, that you feel like everyone is sober here. Yeah, but like I told you before we started shooting the podcast, I really need to go to Bali because I want to
Yes.
experience that actually.
Yep.
Yeah, and especially this specific place where you live.
Have you ever done yoga before?
Yeah. I the last time was actually I think 2 weeks ago.
Cool.
So I will do maybe like one session per month.
Yeah.
So each morning I will do my stretching routine,
Yeah.
which involves a lot of the yoga exercises as well. But let's say this is a bit more on a physical aspect rather than being really connected to myself and let's say the spiritual side of yoga. I feel like if I do it by myself at home, is definitely not the same as going to a class with a teacher, being in a room with other people. It's just a different experience.
I totally agree.
Yeah. But yeah, could you tell us a bit more about your yoga teachings? And actually, a question for me is, do you think that now that you don't drink and you don't have alcohol as this stress reliever, would you say that yoga is the best medicine for stress?
100%. Yeah, it became for me. So I started yoga I was 18 when I started yoga. I'm 31 now. So like 13 years ago. And I was really struggling with my mental health in university, and they became my two coping mechanisms, like alcohol and yoga. And when I became sober, yoga became the thing. Alcohol became the thing. No, yoga became the thing. And for me, yoga is just it's like a grounding meditation and helps anchor me and helps me be able to, like, it's like, you know, I'm filling up myself with like, I don't know if this makes sense, but just like good energy and good stuff, so that when these roadblocks or these challenges come along throughout my day, I can handle it with a bit more compassion and patience. And I find that I'm just a different person when I'm regularly practicing. And for me, I'm teaching yoga, I'm leading so much that for the most part, I do have a yoga practice almost every single day. And it's like when I have one day off, like even today, you know, I ended my yoga retreat. I taught an hour-long class, led a meditation, but I haven't physically done the practice myself.
Yeah.
And I feel a difference. Like I feel myself just a little bit not like here instead of here. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so for me, it's like it's a constant, and it's really important. And something else I've noticed about myself is that on these yoga retreats, they're just really intensive and really beautiful, and, you know, beautiful connection to community, incredible. And then as soon as it ends, there's part of me that's almost like tempted to drink. And I think it's just me. It's just like a decompression after such an intense, amazing experience. Yeah. And so that's when I should practice before I get on this plane tonight. Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. You know, one of my previous guests was Dr. David Lee, and we were discussing a bit about addictions in general, and also, let's say, quote unquote, positive addictions. And we were discussing how, you know, we all had problems with alcohol, and then we removed that addiction. But then we were also questioning ourselves about if we just replace the alcohol addiction with another one. So would you say that you're partially addicted to yoga? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. Yes, I'm addicted, but also at the same, like juxtaposed, I like also don't sometimes have the discipline to do it. You know what I mean? Like,
Okay.
like today, for example, I had all the time, like I think I even set my alarm to give me an hour to do a practice before I taught the class. And then I had tons of time in the hotel before I came down here, and I could have done a practice and I didn't. And so I have an addiction to it, but I also sometimes don't have the self-discipline to actually do it. And that's where it really benefits me to have community, whether I'm attending classes, like whenever I'm in a city, I try to find a studio and like book myself in and commit. Or I also teach a lot of Zoom yoga. And so having that slotted in as like something that I have to show up for to lead others through, and then I get that practice myself. So I think I have an addiction to it, but it's also it's an addiction that needs to be like nurtured by me. But it's a healthy addiction for sure.
Okay.
Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. Yeah. No, because for me, it's just sports in general. Currently, let's say CrossFit is the main one. Sometimes I'm just asking if it's okay to have this addiction. But then it's a philosophical question, right? Because then I'm like, I'm actually really enjoying it while I'm doing it. So I'm indulging in it, even though I was also indulging in alcohol, and I thought I was really enjoying it. But we could say that this is a bit of a more healthy way to live life, right?
Yeah.
But have you ever gone through, I don't know, like a week or 2 weeks without yoga?
Yes.
Okay. How did you feel?
I don't think ever since I got sober, actually.
Okay.
And especially since I started my business, I really can't.
Oh, yeah.
You know, because it's my work. But sometimes I make it like a day or two without yoga. And and I can massively feel it in my mental health. Back when I was a teacher, it was really hard for me to slot in, especially when I was drinking. And sometimes I would make it maybe 5 days without yoga, 6 days without yoga. And I would feel like I was like a disaster. Like my body would ache. It's mostly mental health for me. That's the biggest thing, is like I just don't feel grounded.
Okay. Then, I can totally relate to this. Then it's the same as with me and my CrossFit. Like after 1 week, if I don't do it, I'm like, I just need to do it for my own sake. Yeah.
Totally.
So I'm a bit curious about, because you mentioned that you were a school teacher before.
Yeah.
And then you stopped drinking. And even though you were doing yoga before, after you stopped drinking, you really started doing that as your profession, right?
Yeah.
What were the beginnings of that? What made you do it? What were the initial roadblocks that you experienced?
Yeah. So for me, it was a dream for as long as I can remember. When I was finishing university, I actually didn't even want to finish out university because I'd started teaching yoga. And I was like, this is, what I want to do. And my parents were like, no, you need a real job.
Yeah.
And I don't regret that. Yeah. And I don't regret it in hindsight, because getting a job is what got me out of Canada and what got me to the Middle East and what made me network with all these people, have these amazing opportunities. And I would have never been able to fund my business had I not had that job as a teacher. So I don't regret it at all. But it was a dream for a really long time. And there were a few instances. There was like that time in Canada. And then actually when I got to Kuwait, I started teaching part-time at a studio, and the owner had offered me a full-time job, a visa, an apartment, everything.
Oh, really?
To teach yoga full-time. And I accepted it, and I signed the contract and everything. And then my life kind of fell apart, which is like another story. I like got married and had some crazy stuff happening. And I decided in the end, like, not to do that job and to leave Kuwait. But, by the time I was getting sober, I knew I was like, I'm like deeply unhappy. I'm deeply unhappy in my life. And I actually had this assistant teacher who worked with me for 3 years. And she had been saying the whole time, you should meet my psychic.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm like not into that stuff. I don't believe in it. It's all like, it's not real. And when I was about a couple weeks sober, she's like, you should go meet him. And I figured at this point, I don't really have anything to lose. I meet him, doesn't work out. It's like a waste of money, whatever. Yeah. So I'm in Abu Dhabi at this point, drive all the way to Dubai, get into this guy's house, go up the stairs. He's like, close your eyes, count down from 21 to 1, open them. I open up my eyes and he's like, you're not supposed to be a teacher. You're supposed to be a healer. And I started crying, cried for the whole 45 minutes. He told me, like, you're going to travel around the world. You're going to do yoga retreats. You're going to have this very different community. It's like a fusion of everything, Tai Chi. And I was like, I feel like you're talking about yoga. And he told me I was going to quit my job as a teacher. And that just gave me the like ignition, the belief in myself. I needed someone to believe in me. And I started working nonstop into creating this, but I also didn't really know what to do. So I was, I did a course to become a life coach. I did another yoga training, a bar training, and I was working for this gym. I was working part-time for this gym in Abu Dhabi, and I was teaching for them like 6 days a week, and I was just totally burnt out, exhausted. I was tutoring, and the business that I was building was not really going anywhere. I was progressing. I was networking. Again, I don't regret it, but I had made like $200 at this point. And I went back to the psychic and I was like, I feel like you're like ruining my life right now because I've just wasted so much money telling all these people I'm going to like quit my teaching job and I'm just not getting anywhere with this.
Yeah.
And he said, you're not really building your own business. You're just like, focusing on other people's. And I like didn't want to hear that. And so me and the psychic ended up having a bit of a falling out. And then this was 2020. So of course, what happens next is the pandemic.
Yeah.
And I ended up losing my job at this gym that I was working for 6 days a week, teaching bar, yoga, spin. And I end up starting to teach online and teach on Zoom. And that is like the start of my company, basically. So I built this really big Zoom community. And originally we were this like pandemic community that was all in like trauma of like, what is happening? And we just do yoga every day. And then as the world opened up a little bit, I was like, okay, I need a new angle for this. So I tried on these different things. Like I was like expat yoga, teacher yoga, and then sober yoga right away filled up. And I realized that sober people were seeking community, and that's what I kind of offer the world. And so I started with sober yoga, and it just like kind of boomed like that. And so that is where we began, and we were on Zoom for a really long time. And we still are a little bit. I do lots of Zoom yoga teacher trainings, Zoom yoga classes. We have an app. We have a big like on-demand library of, all these classes I've taught over the years. But now I do all of these in-person retreats. So I do Bali yoga teacher trainings and retreats, but then I also travel around the world. So I'm in Dubai right now, and I'm going to be in Toronto hosting a retreat this coming Saturday. And then I'm flying to Mexico to do a retreat there.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, I have lots of community members around the world who get together in person, and then we have each other as supports throughout the year.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, so in the initial stages, the sober part was not the main component. It was mainly yoga, and then you found out a specific niche in the sober yoga.
Yeah, and I had been very active on the sober Facebook group that helped me get sober. Very active, and gotten a pretty big following in that group. And I didn't realize that to me, it wasn't that I was trying to make a following. I was just trying to like share my sober journey with the world,
Yeah.
And people were really connecting with what I was sharing there. And then I was also life coaching. And I think I was like a life purpose coach or something. And I actually saw this person this week. This guy that I worked with hired me. And I had very few coaching clients at this point. Like I had, a handful, but he hired me. And by like session 2, he said to me, I'm actually having an issue with my drinking. And I ended up becoming like his sober coach, even though I like didn't have any qualifications for this at all. Coach him through 90 days of sobriety. He writes me this letter that says, "Thanks for saving my life." And that's when I was like, this is what I'm supposed to do. And it was like a calling that I was like rejecting. I didn't want to be defined by my sobriety. And then I realized that it was what I had to offer the world.
Okay. What would you say it's your favorite part of what you're doing?
Oh my God, I love like all of it. Oh my God, I love all of it. I feel like I'm able to be the person for people that I wish I had when I was struggling. And I think sometimes I don't even realize the impact that I have on people because there's been so many. You know, I was driving down here today and I was like, what was that woman's name? I was like, there's a woman who used to live in Alain who she found out I was coming to the retreat. She's like, I've been following you on Instagram for years. And she came all the way over and hired me to, you know, teach her yoga and do a one-on-one. And I like can't even remember her name. And she was like, you've had this huge impact on my life. And I couldn't even remember her at this point. I'm like, man, I can't believe that I don't remember that woman, you know? And then on the retreat, there was another woman who I had prompted people to say, like, you know, who are the people you admire the most or something. And she came over and she had written something about me and how I had changed her life because this idea of sober curious was the reason why she is sober today. And I'm like, wow, I had no idea that what I was offering you had such a huge impact on you, you know? And just to be able to offer that to other people, and that's really what it is. It's like community and support and love. That's really what I do through yoga, through coaching, through meditation, through like sharing circles. It's really just giving people that like love and community that they're so deeply lacking.
Interesting. So it's like a very purposeful work, you could say. But right now you're focusing only on women, right? Is there any plan of including men into this as well, or?
So that's a good question.
That's a very heated topic these days, you know?
It's a good question. So I've actually gone back and forth. So
okay.
Yeah. So the original Mindful Life practice was open to everyone.
Okay.
And then I had this little subgroup called Sober Girls Yoga. And then I switched it to Sober Curious Yoga, which was open to everyone. That was like our second year.
Okay.
And then I actually pivoted it back to Sober Girls Yoga. That being said, I have a man who graduated my yoga teacher training, and we're planning a retreat in Spain next year that's going to be for everyone, you know? So it's not that I don't work with everyone. It's just I really feel that women in particular can come into a space where, and the same could probably be said for men and being part of a men's retreat, is that coming into a space where there's only women and you just feel like safe to really talk about what's going on with you. And there's like shared experiences that men would maybe not understand. Yeah. And the same could be said for men having a support group. That being said, it would have to be like a carefully constructed men's group in the sense, you know, that I know there's something going on in the UK right now that one of my friend that I was speaking to this morning, he hates it because it's kind of this macho, like lads group where the men, you know, and he's like, that's the worst. Like, we don't need that. But to have a space where men can like vulnerably share their emotions in a supported space. And I think it's cool to imagine that work being done separately, and then it can be brought together. But I love having a women's only retreat because I really feel that there's something that women really get from that they wouldn't get in their everyday life. So it's doing the Sober Girls Yoga is like my passion, and not my majority work, but I do from time to time do like something mixed.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I totally get it. I feel like when it comes to this very sensitive topics, maybe sometimes we feel more comfortable sharing with people that are the same gender as us.
Totally.
Because they're not this let's say, massive differences, and maybe it's more
Yeah.
relatable as well.
And I also feel like in the sharing circles, like I sometimes feel like I can't go into a circle if I've had men there and talk about something like my dating life. Like I would feel a bit
Yeah.
weird about that.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I'm like, I don't want them to like think I'm like flirting with them. Like it's just, and if I feel that way as a facilitator, and I usually have a pretty close relationship with a lot of the people in my groups, that I imagine then to be like a woman who doesn't know this guy at all, it's probably like even weirder.
Yeah, I can imagine that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Are there any other daily practices that you yourself do on a daily basis besides perhaps yoga?
Yoga, I'm a big journaler and a big writer.
Okay.
And also, okay, I didn't realize this was like a daily practice, but I'm going to share it because a podcast I was listening to the other day, the podcaster was saying that this is their daily practice. And I was like, I guess that's a practice. But I have had like a bubble bath every night since I was like a kid.
Really?
I love having bubble baths, and to the point where I'm like angry if I end up in like a place where there's not a bathtub. Like if I end up in like a hotel room where there's not a bathtub, I'm like, why is there no bathtub here? But for me, it's like a really grounding ritual, and I find it very calming. And I think having those kinds of, I guess for me, it's like a bedtime routine. And I think that's really important, is to be able to create a like container for your day where like this is how you start the day and this is how you end the day. And it doesn't have to be like a whole hour-long yoga practice if that's not what you can fit into your life, but some kind of ritual which you can return to. And so that is my constant, my bedtime routine.
That's very cool, actually.
Yeah.
I haven't done a lot of bubble baths in my
No?
life. Yeah, I should. But in my place, I don't have a bath.
That's a problem. You know, I find that people are either one or the other. Like when I talk about my baths, there are some people that are like totally, that are also big bath people. And then there's people that are like, I hate them. You know, it's like one or the other, like hot, cold weather people. Yeah.
Yeah. No, with me is I have trouble slowing down. So sometimes, I have to be in constant mode of action. Besides my daily practice of meditation.
Yeah.
But this is also a thing to do, right?
Yeah.
So for me, just taking a bubble bath for 30 minutes feels like I should rather be working, right? But I guess this is also a sign that I should change something about my behavior, because we shouldn't be in a rush all the time.
Totally.
I feel like it's a big thing in today's world. Or
Totally.
Constant rush. Coming back to the drinking, do you have any regrets when it comes to your past experience with alcohol?
You know, I don't think, sometimes I'm like, I wish I never drank, but I also don't think that's true, because if I never drank, then I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today. And my life's work is about my sobriety. And like, what would I be doing with my life? Hopefully I'd still be teaching yoga, but I don't know. And so from me having been through everything that I've been through, I feel like I'm able to be this like lighthouse for other people. And so I don't think I would change anything. No. Do you have regrets?
I would have to agree with your answer, actually.
Yeah.
So when I would say the first 6 months when I stopped drinking, I had a lot of regrets, and I kept telling myself, why was I drinking for such a long time?
Yeah.
Why didn't I do this decision like 6 years before that? But now, look, we are here. We're talking about this. We wouldn't be here without it, right?
It's so true.
So I fully agree with you. And I actually also feel like that right now my sobriety is the biggest confidence hack. Because I finally made a promise and I'm keeping it.
Yeah.
While everything else before, everything I said and did, it was just, I didn't know if it's gonna stay like that, or if I'm gonna literally fuck myself over, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, also in that sense, I don't have any regrets, which is great. If anyone wants to reach out to you, what's the best place to find you?
Yeah, I'm a big Instagrammer, and my personal Instagram account is where I'm like most on, and it's Alex McRobs. It's MCROBS. And then my community is the mindfullifepractice.com. So that's where you can find like all my retreats and everything. If you are a sober woman, we have the Sober Girls Yoga Facebook group, which is like a pretty cool hub of other sober or sober curious women around the world.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your next event?
Oh my God. I'm like, what is my next event? I don't know when this podcast will be released. I am going to be in Toronto on Saturday doing a day retreat, and then in Mexico at the end of June hosting a retreat. And after that, I have one in Bali in November. So, and then I have India in March. India, there's one spot left, and that's for sober women. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Exciting.
Yeah.
It's almost like a world tour.
A little bit.
Okay, one final question. And I actually hate this question, but I want to ask it.
Okay.
It's a cliche question that you get asked on an interview, which is, where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Oh my God, I love that. I love that. So I'm a huge fan of Gabby Bernstein. Do you know who Gabby Bernstein is?
No.
Okay, she's like a spiritual teacher. She leads meditations and has some best-selling books on like manifestation. Anyway, I went to see her speak in New York City in December because I really wanted to see her speak. And I remember saying to my uncle after that trip, I was like, that's what I want to do in like 5 years. Like, I just want to be doing, I want to share my story with a bigger audience and people around the world that can have an impact on their life. And so I just really, there's like nothing yet. I feel like career-wise, I've done everything that I wanted to do. I'm running retreats, I'm connecting with women. I feel like I'm very happy. There's nothing in there that I'm like, I really still haven't yet done. I just want to like keep doing it and do more of it and reach more people. And I also have a book that I really want to publish.
I'm looking forward to that, actually. Yeah. Well, Alex, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate your insights and your experience. I'm sure it will touch a lot of people. And I think after this, there are two things I need to do more: yoga and bubble baths.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Take care.